there are different approaches, but that's one approach. It looks for all the different common ways of saying it, and then it looks at the matching sentences for using an information retrieval approach, and then we'll extract those and then run like entity recognizers, or not entity, what do you call it? Yeah, I guess entity recognizers, and it'll extract and it'll say, okay, this is a year, and this question is asking what year, you see, so it'll say, okay, I think this is probably the answer, and then it'll do validation against other sources. So question answering is a very interesting, mainly government-sponsored. There are field. There are two free systems. One is Irania, one is OpenAfira. Ask me about it if you want, and I can hook you. Any questions you have after the talk, because I'm short on textual materials and links, I'll just provide you. There's email classification, right? Routing your email according to priority and subject. That's something. I'm working on all of these, by the way. And a lot of these, there's software out there that does it, but I'm working on integrating it into a coherent system and releasing it. This is all open source. It's just that the code bases have like personal information, like they actually use my personal emails, so that needs to be cleaned. I'm working on releasing everything through CPAN. Most of my code is in Perl, but I'm developing arbitrary bindings that one can use for, APIs for any programming language eventually. And so they wrap existing systems, or very occasionally one of my own systems. Like, okay, so I mentioned entity resolution. Here's event extraction. That's heavily used in like political science. Is taking a look at a text and extracting what are the major events that are happening in this text. There's an area of temporal recognition where you recognize time within text. So like if you say, tomorrow I'm going to go here, if you provide this software called TimeX3, or I forget the name of it, there's this software that I have, it's got bug me now. Okay, it's if you tell it what date the text was written, it'll say, okay, this is referring to this date, and then it looks at all the events mentioned in the text and looks at all the times mentioned. Will actually output a time dependency chart of the text. God, I can't remember what that's called. Fact extraction, right? You have a text, and oftentimes with text, there's many implicit assertions that are built into the text, right? So, like, I can't think of a really good one, so I'm just going to say, like, homosexuality could be implied in the text without ever being explicitly stated. So fact extraction would be charged with like extracting that and saying that, say, Andy is homosexual, which is not the case. Just, not that there's anything wrong with that. So fact extraction is very powerful, and I do have one system that does it. It doesn't really do it because it doesn't look at the implicit assertions within text. That's also related. Yeah. That's also related to knowledge engineering. And so forth. So you might have a common sense database that would be able to extract that kind of stuff. And there's things like ConceptNet and Learner and OpenMind have common sense knowledge bases.
You're sounding a lot like the blind man with the elephant. There are all of these partial solutions and all of these focused tactics, and many of them are work and do various parts. Is there any overall systematization or overall integration, or is the field not that mature yet?
Can you give me an example of a specific capability that would involve overall integration? Are you talking artificial general intelligence, or?
You're talking about techniques for doing various things with texts,
yes,
and various approaches, but certain techniques that'll answer certain kinds of questions, and other techniques that'll answer other kinds of questions, and techniques that'll extract certain classes of data, and other techniques that'll extract other classes of data.
Yeah.
But nothing that you could have a conversation with.
Oh, so
or an
this is
argument with.
natural language processing. I guess chatterbots is one area of that, but to actually achieve a usable chatterbot, a lot of the chatterbots that are out there are based on just pathetic technology, right? Not to put the field down, but it's more of a gimmick than a research field. So the chatterbots that are going to work eventually are going to be based on a bottom-up approach based on these tools. And that's what I'm working on. So I'm actually, like for instance, question answering systems form a basis is a very complex technology to get that working. Not really, I mean, it just needs people to sit down and do it.
But there's all of these various different tools and approaches and techniques. Is there any general framework, theoretical or practical, that organizes them?
There are some frameworks that I'm aware of. The only thing that comes to mind is rhetorical structure theory. It looks at...
So mostly the answer is not yet.
Well, there are different projects, like there's the Proteus project. There are different people out there who have sort of like a more ambitious goal. Now, that would be more of an artificial intelligence subject, I would think.
Well, where do you draw the line then?
Well, as you get to, so this is more of a talk, as you pointed out, about specific capabilities. And I'm doing that kind of intentionally because I think that's a prerequisite to being able to apply the general techniques. But if you want a top-down approach, maybe I can give you that.
Not necessarily,
Okay.
but this is kind of a Marvin Minsky approach, a society of mind.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I actually never read that. So, yeah, I'm just trying to hook people up. This is a sort of an applied talk as to what you can actually, how you can integrate this into your Python program to achieve more. You know, I would love if people would come over to my house and we'd all hack for 3 days and we'd have an intelligent question answering chatbot. Who's up for it? Maybe? Yes. Anyone? Anyone? Okay. So see, that's the problem. There's just not enough interest in it. So I've sort of learned to not talk about that.
Well, I'm not thinking of Python yet.
Oh, well, whatever your language, PHP, I'm sure. See, everything, it's all going to run on paired virtual machine anyway. You know?
Yeah.
That's the Perl 6, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, actually using Perl as a knowledge representation language, that's one of my, see, that's an example of a more coherent type of system. And I have a system, I was going to present on it, but I decided not to, but I'll talk about it. It's called Sayer. And basically what it does is it looks at text and tries to assert theorems about it, right? But it's not asserting theorems in like a typical logic. What it's doing is it's creating a graph of function calls. So you can use arbitrary Perl code. And so it looks at a specific, data point, which is a node in the graph of function calls. And then you apply the function call and you get out another Perl data structure, which is generally a list. And you use a data dumper, which is a form of serialization for the data structure. And then you just make that another node within your index of data. And then you call these, you call all sorts of tests and use machine learning to see based on the test I've already called what test should I call. So for instance, it's very useful for analyzing a text, breaking it down into individual parts, and saying what the different meaning of the text is. And it does so in an arbitrary and persistent way, as opposed to a lot of natural language processing techniques which involve a lot of that data is lost over time in the different phases of processing. There's people like OpenCog are trying to address that. So, okay, any questions up until this point? Any direction that anyone wants to go? Anything that caught anyone's eye, or is everyone bored?
I was just gonna say, wasn't there a search engine that proposed that it could take plain English questions and return? What's that?
Wolfram Alpha?
Yeah, Jeeves. Yes,
Yeah.
Jeeves.
Okay. So Wolfram Alpha and earlier than that Ask Jeeves. Those are both examples of question answering systems. So there was a whole bunch of fuss about it, but I was like, okay, I already have 2 systems that do this, So Slashdot doesn't always have the most relevant news for the. So if you want more relevant news on this particular subject, come to me and we can discuss one-to-one. There's going to be a POSI meeting. Like I said, you can download OpenAfira. It already does that. It'll Google the web for your answers. It's pretty accurate. It doesn't do definitional question answering. You can't say like, what is a camel? And it'll say a camel is a mammal. A camel is a definitional question answering, different type of definitional question answering than the one